It doesn't happen all at once. It's quiet, almost sacred in its disguise. One day she's full of laughter, full of plans. Then suddenly, the laughter fades, and all that's left is duty. The woman who once prayed with passion now whispers quick words before sleep. The woman who dreamed now only lists what needs to be done tomorrow. It's not that she stopped believing, it's that she stopped being. Her heart became a vessel for everyone else's needs, until there was no room left for her own soul. That's the silent tragedy of many women of faith. They mistake self-forgetting for holiness. But forgetting yourself isn't devotion, it's disappearance. And heaven never asked for that kind of sacrifice. The life of a woman often carries an invisible cross. Work, family, children, ministry. It all becomes a rhythm that drowns the stillness within. That stillness, the ancient hesychasm of the heart, where God speaks softly, becomes lost beneath the noise of obligation. She keeps going, believing that serving without rest equals virtue. But what begins as love turns into survival. And survival is not the same as grace. Redemption is found not in exhaustion, but in awareness, remembering that the soul also needs care. Even Jesus withdrew to pray alone, Luke 5:16. Why does she think she shouldn't? The Lord himself sought silence, yet she fears it, fears that if she stops, the world she built will crumble. But the truth is, the world will keep spinning, and maybe, for once, she'll finally breathe. There's a moment every woman reaches, the quiet kitchen, the half-drunk cup of coffee, the sudden awareness that she's been running on empty. She feels a deep contrition, though she doesn't know why. Maybe it's guilt for wanting rest, or fear of seeming selfish, but that ache isn't sin. It's the soul calling her home. The difficulties she faces are not punishments, they're invitations. God is not asking for her exhaustion, but her attention. Her doubts about her worth, her fatigue, her longing for peace, these are sacred signs. They mean the spirit is still alive, whispering beneath the surface, waiting for her to remember that holiness isn't about disappearing into others. It's about being fully alive with them. Family, faith, and duty. They were never meant to replace the person she is. They were meant to flow from her, not consume her. When she forgets herself, even love becomes distorted. She gives without joy, serves without presence, prays without heart. The woman who forgets herself begins to fade from her own story, and the world loses something divine through her absence. For every time she neglects her spirit, a bit of light dims. But redemption remains close. It doesn't demand perfection, only remembrance. The gentle act of turning back to the source, like a candle rekindled after darkness. She doesn't need to create light. She is light. She just forgot where she placed the match, and maybe that's where the healing begins, in admitting that she's lost herself somewhere between duty and devotion. There's no shame in that. Even saints wandered through shadows before finding peace. The spiritual life is not about denying one's humanity but sanctifying it. God doesn't want a silent servant. He wants a living soul. The woman who forgot herself is not gone forever. She's simply waiting to be found again, hidden beneath the noise and the weariness. And in the next breath, the next pause, the next prayer, she might just hear it, that sacred whisper that says, "Daughter, come home." There's a strange kind of silence that comes after too much giving. It's not peaceful, it's hollow. The woman wakes in the morning and feels it before her feet even touch the ground. That dull ache in her chest. The sense that something's missing, even though everything is exactly as it should be. She loves her family. She serves her church. She smiles when she needs to. But deep inside, she's fading. The prayers that once felt alive now fall from her lips like memorized lines. Her Bible lies open but unread. The silence around her grows louder every day. But it's not the hesychasm of the saints. It's the silence of a soul forgotten. She keeps asking God for strength. But maybe what he's offering her isn't strength at all. Maybe it's rest. There's a story in the gospel that never gets old. Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus while Martha runs herself weary. "Martha, Martha," he said, "you are worried about many things." Luke 10:41. Every time she hears that, she flinches. She is Martha, tired, faithful, restless. She wants to sit at his feet, but the kitchen calls, the children cry, the messages keep coming. So she runs again, believing holiness is found in movement. But in that constant motion, she loses her heart's stillness. The hesychasm, The sacred quiet where the spirit breathes is drowned out by the noise of her responsibilities. The silence she's left with is no longer holy. It's heavy. It presses down on her like unseen weight. She begins to wonder if God still hears her, or if she's become invisible, even to heaven. But God does not dwell only in mountaintops and monasteries. He walks barefoot through kitchens, offices, hospitals. He listens to prayers whispered over laundry and tears shed over unpaid bills. The life of a woman is not less sacred because it's ordinary. It's holy because it's ordinary. Yet she's forgotten that. Her heart, once burning, now beats mechanically. She doubts her worth, not because she's unfaithful, but because she's tired. The difficulties of womanhood weigh differently. They are invisible burdens carried with quiet endurance. And sometimes endurance without renewal becomes despair. That's when God begins to move, not through thunder, but through the gentle nudge that says, "Come back to me, even here." Redemption often begins where logic ends. The woman who feels furthest from God is often the one he's closest to. In her emptiness, he finds space to speak again. In her silence, he plants new beginnings. But she must be willing to stop long enough to listen. That's the hard part, listening. True contrition is not about shame. It's about honesty, to look at her reflection and admit, "I've been trying to live without resting in you." That moment of truth is not failure, it's awakening. It's the first breath of resurrection, the quiet recognition that the heart, no matter how dry, can still bloom again. And maybe this is the purpose of her silence after all, to teach her that God doesn't need her performance, only her presence. The stillness she fears might be the very place he's waiting. If she dares to pause, to step away from the noise for even a few breaths, she'll feel it again, the faint pulse of grace. The sacred rhythm she thought she'd lost forever. Her heart will remember what her mind forgot. She's loved, even in her emptiness. And as she lifts her eyes for the first time in what feels like forever, the silence that once suffocated her begins to sing. There comes a moment when even prayer feels foreign. The words sound right, but the heart is absent. She kneels but feels nothing. The room is quiet, yet inside her the noise won't stop. Doubts echo louder than scripture. Fears linger longer than faith. It's not that she stopped believing in God. It's that she stopped believing that he still looks at her. Somewhere along the road of motherhood, ministry, and endless giving, she convinced herself that God's eyes were always on others, on the ones she helps, on the ones who seem more deserving. The woman who once carried a glowing sense of purpose now drifts through her days, haunted by a silent question. Do I still matter? That is the ache of spiritual disconnection, the slow fading of one's worth in her own eyes. Faith, when untended, becomes like a garden choked by weeds. She used to find God in everything: the laughter of her children, the sound of rain, the soft rustle of morning light. But now the same moments feel distant, drained of meaning. She scrolls through devotionals, listens to sermons, repeats verses, but nothing sinks in. The spiritual life that once felt alive has turned mechanical, and this too is part of the difficulties of a woman's journey, when the soul that once nurtured others becomes starved itself. Yet even here, redemption waits, not in noise, but in honesty. Sometimes, the most sacred prayer is the one whispered through tears. Lord, I don't feel you, but I still need you. That is contrition in its purest form, not despair, but desperate love. Her family begins to notice it, even if they don't understand it. The joy that once colored her home now feels muted. She still cooks, still works, still smiles, but her eyes no longer glow. She's become the shadow of her own light. The difficulty isn't that she's lost faith, it's that she's lost herself inside her faith. She gave everything for everyone else, but forgot that the soul also needs to receive. Even the holiest water runs dry when it's poured out without replenishment. This is where the life of a woman meets the edge of her own strength. She begins to realize that serving without resting in God isn't holiness, it's self-erasure. True holiness doesn't demand disappearance, it demands communion. In that painful awareness, she begins to see her worth differently. Maybe God never asked her to be the strongest. Maybe he only asked her to be sincere. The stillness she once feared, the same silence that frightened her, is slowly becoming familiar again. She starts to notice how grace shows up in the smallest moments. The hug of a child, a breath between tasks, a sunrise she almost missed. These are not random, they're invitations. Redemption isn't something she earns. It's something she remembers. And she remembers now. She was never meant to prove her worth to God. She was meant to live from it. Every act of love, every sacrifice, every tear shed in secret was seen all along. And as she begins to grasp that truth, the darkness inside her shifts. The silence, once empty, becomes sacred again. The distance she felt from heaven was never abandonment. It was preparation. A divine pause before renewal. Her heart, once numb, begins to feel again. Not all at once, but gently, like spring thawing after a long winter. And for the first time in a long time, she whispers not words of duty, but of intimacy. Lord, I'm still here. And somewhere deep within, the answer comes, not in thunder, but in the quiet pulse of grace. Healing rarely comes in flashes of glory. It comes in whispers. In the quiet hours when the world still sleeps, she begins to sense it. A softness, a presence. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. The God she thought she lost was never gone. He was simply waiting for her to stop running. In that still moment, she sits by the window, eyes closed, hands resting on her lap. The morning light touches her face, and she feels something she hasn't in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that demands proof or perfection, but the kind that just is. She realizes now that redemption is not about being fixed. It's about being found. The woman who forgot herself finally remembers. She was never meant to disappear in service, but to reflect his love by living fully. The return to essence begins not with action, but with surrender. She doesn't need to rebuild her old self. She needs to rediscover the soul beneath the noise. She learns to pray again, but this time differently. Her prayers are not lists or laments. They are breaths. Lord, be near. Thank you. I'm still learning. That's hesychasm alive. Not silence of the mouth, but quiet of the heart. The same hands that once trembled from exhaustion now open freely, receiving grace instead of guilt. And as the days unfold, she starts to see God everywhere again. In her children's laughter, in her husband's tired smile, in the sound of her own heartbeat. Life didn't get easier. It got holier. The family notices it too. The home that once felt heavy now hums with warmth. She laughs again. Not the polite laugh she used to hide behind, but one born of freedom. She's rediscovered what love really means. Not losing herself in others, but meeting God through them. Her difficulties remain, but they no longer define her. Her faith is not fragile anymore. It's quiet, strong, and deep. The light of redemption now lives in her presence. Even her silence feels different. It no longer isolates. It heals. She understands what contrition truly is, not punishment for failing, but the humble return of a heart that's been away too long. There's something sacred in the way she moves now. Slow, deliberate, grateful. She takes time to rest, to breathe, to be. She doesn't see stillness as weakness anymore. She sees it as worship. Every ordinary moment, folding clothes, lighting a candle, watching her children sleep, has become an altar. Her soul has found rhythm again, not in perfection, but in balance. That is the quiet power of a redeemed heart. It no longer seeks to please the world. It simply abides in the love of God. The woman who once forgot herself now lives from a deeper truth. She was never meant to earn grace. It was always hers. And as the day closes, she whispers a final prayer, not asking for anything, not even strength. Just gratitude. Thank you, Lord, for bringing me back. The same silence that once haunted her now feels holy. She sits there a while longer, watching the golden light fade across her home. For the first time in years, she feels whole, not because everything is fixed, but because she finally remembered who she is. The child of a patient God, the woman reborn through quiet faith, the soul that found its way back to peace. Maybe that's the real miracle, not the storm stopping, but the woman standing. The one who lost herself, yet somehow found the strength to return. The one who broke but didn't stay broken. She discovered what so many forget, that God was never waiting for perfection. He was waiting for surrender, and in that surrender, she became whole again. The woman who forgot herself learned that faith isn't about giving everything until there's nothing left. It's about giving from a place that's full. It's about loving others without abandoning the soul that God breathed into her. Because she matters, not for what she does, but for who she is. Every quiet moment, every tear shed in secret, every small act of love was seen by him. And now, he's calling her back, not to serve harder, but to live deeper. So tonight, if you're listening and you feel like that woman, tired, unseen, stretched thin between duty and faith, this message is for you. You don't need to start over. You just need to come home. Sit in the silence. Breathe again. Let grace do what effort never could. God has not forgotten you. He's been waiting for you to remember yourself. The woman he created. The one who carries his light even in exhaustion. And if this message touched your heart, don't walk away from it. Stay. This is your space, where we remember who we are before God, where brokenness becomes beauty, and faith breathes again. Subscribe to this channel and join a growing circle of women who are rediscovering peace, purpose, and spiritual life through stories like this. Every week, we walk deeper together, into the mystery, into the silence, into redemption. Because the journey isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've been all along.